Imagine being 9 years old. You just took a test at school. You're super excited because you scored very high. You run home, burst into the house. Ma, look what I scored on my test. Before you can fully get the words out, your mother whirls around and throws a pot at your head with such force that it shatters the tiles on the back of the wall. That's what it was like growing up in my household. My mother was a hurt person who in turn hurted her children. At the age of 13, I decided that I no longer wanted to be subjected to the abuse of my mother. So I ran away. I was a naive 13-year-old who thought that somebody would see this smart, cute kid, still a little cute, and they would take me in and raise me with the love, nurture, and care that all children deserve. But unfortunately, it didn't work like that. Instead, I was seduced into the crack cocaine trade. Within the first 6 months of being introduced to that culture, I experienced every imaginable horror that comes with it. My childhood friend was murdered. My brother was shot. A few years later, my other brother got shot. I was robbed at gunpoint. And one time I was beat nearly to death and left on a cold bathroom floor. And I remember laying on that floor and asking this question: what kind of world do we live in where adults would allow this to happen to children? Despite this horrible reality, I continued on in the culture. And then things changed. On March the 8th, 1990, on a crisp spring morning on the west side of Detroit, I was standing on the corner with a friend when a car rolled up. I recognized immediately it was a guy that I got into a minor dispute with, and I thought he wanted to have an old school fist fight. But instead, he pulled out a gun and he shot me multiple times. And I remember while I was running, thinking to myself, I hope he doesn't hit me in my back or in the back of my head. My friends called the ambulance, which never came, and eventually I was escorted to the hospital by my friend who had been shot the prior year. He dropped me off, the doctors brought me in, extracted the bullets from my body with the exception of one, patched me up, and within days, I was back on that same corner. Not one adult thought to ask me how I felt, what I was thinking. Not one professional in that environment thought to recommend counseling or to offer the single form of human compassion possible: a hug. And so I returned to my neighborhood with this volatile cocktail of emotions. I was angry, I was frustrated, I was paranoid, but more importantly, I was afraid. Because cars no longer represented cars. They were death chariots. And strangers walking down the street were no longer potential friends. They were potentially the Grim Reaper. And so I did what many of the young men and women that's growing up in cities like Detroit and Chicago do all the time. I began to carry a gun. And I began to run this narrative in my head that if I found myself in conflict, that I would shoot first. 16 months later, on a hot summer night, July 1991, 1 month into my 19th birthday, I found myself in a conflict. As the argument escalated, I remember this moment where I turned to walk in the house. In that moment, I heard what I thought was the car door opening that contained the guys I was having this conflict with. And I turned and fired what turned out to be 4 fatal shots, tragically ending a man's life. I was subsequently arrested, charged with open murder, and sentenced to 17 to 40 years in prison at the age of 19. When I walked into prison, I was bitter, I was angry, I didn't want to accept responsibility, and I found myself getting into more and more trouble. In my first 5 years, I committed 25 misconducts that ranged from assault on staff, to dangerous contraband, to assault on inmate. But in the midst of this, a miracle happened. I met some of the most amazing, thoughtful, profound mentors that I've ever encountered in my life. These are men that are serving life sentences. Some have been in since they've been juveniles. Many of them have died since I've been out. But they saw something in me that was redeemable. And so they began to give me books. They began to challenge me to read and challenge me to think. And I was fortunate because in prison, most people aren't literate. The average reading grade level in prison is 3rd grade. I was fortunate that I can actually read and comprehend. But those books weren't enough to deal with the pain. And so I found myself getting in more and more trouble. 5 years in, I received this letter, the second miracle. It was a letter from the woman who raised the man I was responsible for killing. In the letter, she detailed how I had destroyed their family, but then she went on to say something that was so profound and deep. She said, "I forgive you, because that's what God would want me to do, and furthermore, I love you." So those words stuck with me. But even in the midst of that, I was still caught up in the cycle of anger and violence that characterized prison life in America. 9 years into my sentence, I was sent to solitary confinement for 4.5 years straight. 23-hour lockdown in a cell that's approximately not even the length of this stage up to here was my existence for 4.5 years straight. It is by far the most barbaric and inhumane aspect of our society because 80% of the men down there had some type of mental illness coming in. And so I was in this environment where men cut themselves just so they can get out to a regular hospital and experience the human touch, where one man swallowed a battery with the hopes that they would take him away to an environment where somebody would actually treat him with some type of care and compassion. And one man became so desperate that he set himself on fire inside his cell. This was the day-to-day reality in solitary confinement. Now, statistics suggest that after 30 days, you begin to lose aspects of who you are. For me, the third miracle happened in the midst of that tumultuous environment. I received a letter from my son, who I often got letters from, but this letter was different. In this letter, for the first time in my incarceration, he wrote and told me that his mother had told him while I was in prison. He said, "Dear Dad, my mom told me while you was in prison for murder. He said, Dad, don't kill because Jesus watches what you do." It was something so profound about those words coming from my child that it shook all the prison toughness, all the street savvy off of me. And in that moment, I made a decision that if I did nothing else in my life, that I would give my son the father that he can be proud of. Now, at this point, I never even thought or imagined that I would ever get out of prison. And so I looked around and I said, what can I do in this very moment to prove to my son that not only am I a good father, but that I'm a good human being who made a poor decision? And so I began to write. And I began to detail all of the things that took me from being an honor roll scholarship student with dreams of being a doctor to serving out my most promising years in prison. And in the midst of this writing, I realized I had never accomplished anything in my life other than the GED. And so I challenged myself to write a book. I said, if you're serious about turning your life around, write a book, but just don't write a book. Write a book in 30 days. I know some of y'all have had to write dissertations, and maybe some of y'all are authors, and y'all probably realize it's a very ambitious goal. Me, I was an idiot back then. I didn't know that. But I had to specify a time frame, otherwise I knew I wouldn't accomplish it. And so I wrote my first book. And I was super proud of myself. And then I sent it to a guy in the cell across from me on a fish line, which we made out of the strings from our socks and the toothpaste tube. Some people use their underwear. I like to keep my drawers. And so I sent it over there to him. And I had this moment when I realized it was my only copy, and I was like, what was I thinking? But he read that book, and he came back and he told me that it was one of the best books he's ever read. And I got really, really excited. And then I had one of those kind of aha moments like he is in solitary confinement, so he's probably exceptionally bored over there. Could have just sent them a recipe, been like, yo, this is my aunt's gravy recipe. Like, this is amazing. But it challenged me. It challenged me to start sending my work out. And I wasn't writing like with a fancy laptop or a fancy word processor. I was writing with a pen. And it wasn't even a regular ink pen. It was a small ink pen that they would give you that was really flimsy, and I would roll it up in paper, because I had some experience rolling some things up in paper. Don't judge me on this. And I would write all day and all night, and got these books out. And then finally, when I was released from solitary confinement, I realized I wanted to get my books out to a wider audience, so I started a publishing company. Then I got sued by the Department of Corrections for $1 million, which clearly I didn't have. But then it was time to come home. So on June 22nd, after 2 parole board denials, I was finally released, June 22nd, 2010. On my way out the door, they told me that I would be back in prison in 6 months. Because men like me don't make it. After being gone for 2 decades, I wouldn't be able to adapt to society. But here's what actually happened. In 2012, I won the Black Male Engagement Leadership Award for my work in the inner city using literature as a mentoring tool. I followed that up with a fellowship at MIT Media Lab. I ended up getting another fellowship at Kellogg. I started a project at MIT Media Lab called the Atonement Project, which was nominated for a TED Prize. I was one of 20 finalists of that $1 million prize. I didn't win because clearly I might not be here. 2014, I delivered a talk at TED's 30th anniversary, which was named one of the top talks of 2014. Currently has over 1.3 million views. 2016, I was named Manchester University Innovator of the Year. In 2016, I had this little small thing happen. Did this little interview with Oprah. They sent me an email like, you know, Oprah would like to know if you can be available in Hawaii for an interview. I was like, let me check my schedule. Might be able to fit her in somewhere. And then on March 8th, 2016, 26 years after the day I was shot, my book debuted on the New York Times bestseller list. Now, I don't highlight all these things, and there's many more, to brag or to boast. I might brag a little bit. If not, then you got to give yourself a pat on the back. I highlight this because we have over 2.2 million men and women incarcerated in this country. We have thousands of men and women who are languishing away in cells who have a level of genius that can add so much to the society we currently live in. But we continue to throw them away because we live in a disposable society. I highlight this because I'm not an anomaly. My mentors are some of the most brilliant minds I've ever encountered. And yet, most will never get a second chance. There are men and women who walk out of prison every day to a very unforgiving society, a society that says, we're going to hold you hostage to your worst moment for the rest of your life and not allow you an opportunity to reinvent yourself, reimagine yourself, and reemerge in society as somebody who contributes something meaningful. So I highlight these things because I know that the people in this room right now are fully capable of helping us design a world where we actually give people second chances and where we think about people as human beings as opposed to numbers and statistics. It is for that reason that I share what I've done. Thank you for your time.